Our story today happened many years ago in a little village in Norway. Nadia had spent her entire life in the village. She'd been born there and grown up with her mother and father. Then, when she was old enough, she started her own family with a man called Levan. Nadia and Levan loved each other very much and eventually decided that they wanted a child of their own. Not long after Nadia gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, who they call Maya, the family was happy for many years, with Nadia, Levan, and Maya creating many happy memories together. As the years went by and Maya grew older, she eventually found a man who she fell in love with, and the two were married. But because of her husband's job, Maya had to move away from her mother and father, as her new husband had a very important job in the finance industry, and so he needed to be closer to the city. Nadia and Levan were happy that their daughter was starting her own life and told her not to worry about them. But after a few years, Levan became very sick and he sadly passed away. After 40 years of marriage, Nadia was left on her own. Now, at first, Maya insisted that Nadia should move in with her and her husband so that they could look after the elderly woman and so that she wouldn't be on her own. But Nadia refused, as she didn't want to leave the village that had been her home for her entire life. Luckily, even though she was now on her own, there were still people in the village willing to help her out, as she had been a well-loved teacher at the local school during her younger years. When she worked, a man called Georgie had been one of her students, and he often visited the elderly woman to make sure that she was okay. If anything needed fixing around the house, he would happily do it for her. Along with being a bit of a handyman, Georgie also enjoyed hunting. He would often track into the nearby forest to find a suitable game to hunt, and he would sometimes share the meat with Nadia. One day, Nadia decided that the fence around her garden needed fixing, so she asked Georgie to fix it up for her. The kind-hearted man agreed, but told the elderly woman that he also had a surprise for her. Once Georgie arrived at Nadia's house, she soon saw what the surprise was in his arms. The hunter was carrying 4 tiny puppies. He told Nadia that he had found them in the forest all on their own and that their mother had been nowhere in sight. Georgie then explained that while he would be happy to look after them himself, he already had 2 other dogs at home that wouldn't be too welcoming to the tiny canines. However, he forgot to mention that the small canines weren't actually dogs, but were wolf cubs. After getting over her shock, Nadia agreed to take the puppies in herself, as she'd been wanting to get a puppy for a while to keep her company, and she could save these 4 lonely babies. At the same time, Nadia took the pups into her home and immediately found 4 old bowls that could be used to put the animals' food in. The elderly woman emptied a can of meat into each bowl, and the pups were happy to quickly munch it down. But being growing animals, and wild ones unbeknownst to Nadia, the puppies stared at the old woman as if asking for more food. Nadia chuckled and joyfully obliged the cubs until they were finally full. Once the young animals were satisfied, Nadia laid down some old blankets for them, and the little pups quickly fell asleep in their new beds. Once the cubs were asleep, Nadia left them in the house and went back outside to thank Georgie for finding the adorable babies. Georgie realized that Nadia believed the puppies to be dogs. However, he thought that while they were still young, they wouldn't do any harm, and he could find a suitable replacement for the cubs when they were strong enough to survive on their own. Later that evening, as Georgie finished up his work on the fence, Nadia went and thanked him for his hard work and for always being around to help her out. She then gave the kind-hearted man a bag of sweets for him to take back to his children before bidding him goodnight for the evening. Once Georgie had gone, Nadia went back inside her home, where she discovered that all 4 cubs were awake and creating quite a bit of a mess. Now, still overcome with the joy of having some new company, Nadia wouldn't stay mad at them for long. She cleaned up the mess and then realized that she needed to give each of the puppies a name. She decided to call the 4 cubs Teddy, Rascal, Storm, and Mischief. As time went on and the cubs began to grow, Nadia began to suspect that they weren't normal dogs. They didn't look like they were regular canines, as they were much larger, their teeth were much sharper, and they looked wilder all around as well, so that all the local dogs would growl and bark at the cubs as they walked past them. Nadia's suspicions were finally confirmed one day when a local hunter was walking past and saw the 4 canines playing together in her garden. He instinctively reached for his gun, but was stopped when Nadia asked him what he was doing. The hunter then told the elderly woman that the 4 animals that she had weren't dogs at all, but were actually wolves. Nadia was shocked by the news, but she wasn't afraid. She loved all of her pups equally, no matter what. They had never once shown aggression towards her, so she wasn't worried that they would hurt her. Nadia and the 4 wolves continued to live happily for the next year. The canines were loyal to Nadia and guarded the home just like a dog would. As fall came and the temperatures dropped, Nadia and the wolves would happily spend their days inside the warm home. One cold fall evening, there was a knock on Nadia's door. Wondering who it could be, the elderly woman opened the door, only to be confronted by 3 strange men. One of the men was holding a gun, which he immediately pointed at Nadia. He threatened that if she didn't hand over all of her money and valuables that she had in her home, that he would shoot her. The 3 men barged into Nadia's home and began to make their way in further when they suddenly heard 4 loud growls. It turned out that with all of the noise that the men were making, they had woken up the 4 wolves that had been lying asleep in the living room. The canines realized that Nadia was in danger and quickly jumped into action. With the men confused and scared of what was happening, Mischief, Rascal, and Storm jumped at them and bit their legs and ankles. Meanwhile, Teddy ran over to Nadia and jumped in front of her, protecting her from the man with the gun. While the wolves fought, the elderly lady snuck into her bedroom where she called the police. Just as she finished on the phone, though, a gunshot rang out through the home, followed by an animal's cry. Nadia rushed back into the living room where she saw Teddy huddled on the floor with a bullet wound in his hind leg. One of the men had managed to get the gun and hurt the poor animal. Frightened by the noise of the weapon, the 3 men tried to make a run for it. But as they exited the house, they found themselves surrounded by police. They were very quickly arrested. But Nadia paid no attention to them as she was too focused on helping Teddy. Thankfully, she was able to get some help and the wound healed. Over the next few weeks, news of the 4 wolves' heroic deeds soon got around. But for Nadia, their new fame didn't matter. She loved them just like she would any other dog, and they loved her just as much in return. There are no boundaries between animals and humans. Some animals are commonly kept as pets, like cats, dogs, and hamsters. And then there are more exotic ones, like parrots, snakes, and hedgehogs. And then there are these rare occasions when people keep pets like Kira. Kira is a wolf. She was abandoned by her mother when she was only 3 days old and couldn't survive in the wild because of that. Thankfully, a Russian woman named Alida decided to take her and raise her and train her so that she could have another chance at life. Alida had a lot of hard work to do to domesticate Kira. Wolves are scared of new things, so a lot of socialization was needed. Kira met with grown-up kids and other animals, and she went to all sorts of places. And now she's a fully domesticated wolf that wouldn't hurt anyone. Kira was born in a shelter after her domesticated mom was abandoned by her family. Sadly, Kira and her siblings were not accepted by their mother, and the shelter had to figure out what to do. Kira's mom used to love living with the family, but they didn't manage to take care of her, and she ended up in a nursery. She no longer trusts people. Kyra was born in the same nursery. If released into the wild, there's a high probability she would die since no one taught her to hunt. Kyra's mother abandoned her babies when they were 3 days old and in the nursery, so they were fed by hand, and they took her away as soon as Kyra got stronger, and then also first fed her with milk. The staff hand-fed the little fella so that they could get all the nutrition they need while searching for a permanent home to give them. Thankfully, Alida, a Russian citizen, decided to take Kira in because there was no way the little wolf would have survived in the wild. I took her from the nursery when she was 28 days old. She's smart, but very stubborn. When making decisions, she focuses on herself, not me. From the very beginning, I began the process of her socialization. She saw a huge number of dogs, people, and children. We walked in different places so that she could study different smells, hear new sounds. Wolves have an innate neophobia, a fear of something new. This is a very difficult process, long and tedious, but it's necessary so that Kira can live with me in an urban environment and feel comfortable. Alita took Kira when she was 28 weeks old and continued to care, feed, and teach her to be as domesticated as possible. Upbringing, too, had its problems, but with age, it all goes away and the work bears fruit. Kira has a stable and mild psyche, does not react to aggression from other dogs, and does not provoke conflicts herself. She treats children very carefully, and if the child's afraid of her, she doesn't approach him. Alita socialized her. Kira met lots of dogs and people and went on all sorts of adventures so that she would be used to the modern world and wouldn't be scared of her surroundings. On the street, people generally react with curiosity, ask to be photographed, asked if it's dangerous to live with a wolf, and especially when there's a child at home. Kira is now 1 year old and is an amazing domesticated wolf. Kira lives with the family in their home with a 7-year-old boy whom she loves dearly and treats with lots of love and care. Alita mentioned that they always get approached by curious passersby and asked many questions about what it's like living with a wolf. In real life, people react quite normally because Kira is very friendly and doesn't instill fear in people. But on the internet, people are both angry and stupid. They write different things, especially after a series of reports about them. There were a lot of reports that she was acting very stupidly since she kept a predatory animal at home. Kira doesn't react if other dogs provoke her, and she's always calm and collected. Kira is loved and taken care of by her amazing family. If they hadn't taken her in, she probably wouldn't be alive right now. She was now quoted as saying, "We live with her, breaking people's stereotypes about wolves. It's difficult to educate such a beast competently, but I knew what I was going for. Before taking her, I studied a lot of articles and information, communicated with wolf owners and kennels, but I understand that wolves are wild animals. Dogs are bred specifically for being pets and working animals. Dogs also reach the point that they bond with the people who love them. Wolves, however, are different. Wolves are wild animals and don't have the same relationship with humans. Sure, the wolf will like a person, mostly just because the person provides food and shelter, but that's about it. The one goal that wolves have is to survive. Most dogs have two, and it's to survive and please their owner. Wolf-dog hybrids are usually an exception, though depending on how much wolf is in the bloodline. Having half dog, half wolf, I think, qualifies me to answer this one at least a little bit. It's extremely enlightening to note the differences between my hybrid. This term's frowned upon by some purists, but whatever, standard dog. Wolves can have a relationship, but it won't be the same as the dog. Dogs are bred to bond with humans, so it's in their blood. It's their instinct. Wolves don't have that instinct, that need for humans. So yes, they can bond with humans, but it won't be in most cases a deep and loyal bond. The instinct will eventually win over.